Today is really a great day. I am a Greco-Catholic, but I am also happy with my Orthodox brothers in Ukraine and here in Canada, in North America, because my wife's family is also Orthodox. So, and they belong to the Kievan Patriarchate, and I know very well that situation, and I think it was a huge moral crime that all these millions of people were denied even to call themselves as Christians. It was a huge crime. And I want to speak about the ecumenical dimension of all these processes. First, I would like to focus on the global level of the ecumenical dialogue between the Vatican, the Russian Orthodox Church, and Constantinople, respectively. And then I will give some thoughts concerning ecumenical dialogue within Ukraine itself. In the so-called Havana Declaration, or joint declaration of Pope Francis and Patriarch Kirill of Moscow and all Russia, we find quite a strange passage, among some others. Quotation: "It is our hope that the schism between the Orthodox faithful in Ukraine may be overcome through existing canonical norms, that all the Orthodox Christians of Ukraine may live in peace and harmony, and that the Catholic communities in the country may contribute to this in such a way that our Christian brotherhood may become increasingly evident." A lot of experts tried to figure out what they meant, since there is no common canonical ground between Catholics and Orthodox, especially concerning those issues that are crucial to the Ukrainian case. This passage becomes more uncertain within today's context, when we hear that all stakeholders of the process are appealing to the holy canons of the Orthodox Church. I think it's quite evident that this passage was a product of church diplomacy, like many others. And as is usual in such cases, each side then has enough space for their own interpretations. One response to this passage from those Ukrainian Orthodox who are striving to achieve Autocephaly was quite interesting and logical. We want Autocephaly for our Church because this is our right due to the canonical tradition of the Eastern Orthodox Church. It is quite evident that the ecumenical dialogue between the Catholic and Orthodox churches has different vectors and even consists of two or more dialogues. I don't want to go into the history of this question, going so far back as the missions of Antonio Posevino to Ivan the Terrible. In my opinion, the present configuration of that dialogue is mostly the product of the Cold War era and was modified after the collapse of the Soviet Union. Starting from the period of the Second Vatican Council, an active bilateral dialogue between Rome and Moscow coincides with the parallel dialogue between Rome and Constantinople and Rome and the whole Orthodox world. During this whole period, the Moscow Patriarchate successively demonstrated to the Vatican's diplomats that without good relations with Russian Orthodox Church, all other forms of dialogue with the Orthodox world would be fruitless. Frankly speaking, within the Roman Curia, there were and still are such ecumenists who think that the keys to the whole Orthodoxy are in Moscow. The state of dialogue got worse after the renewal of the structures of the Ukrainian Greco-Catholic Church in Ukraine at the end of the 80s. The disruption of dialogue showed that the successes of the post-conciliar communication were guaranteed only by the political situation of the 60s and 70s. Ecumenical dialogue became a hostage of that post-war European order, and the consequences of the situation we are experiencing up until today. If in the 19th century the main goal of the dialogue between St. Petersburg and Rome was to limit the so-called Polish separatism, in the second part of the 20th century the Ukrainian question became the crucial one. During the last 28 years, we have always heard from the representatives of Moscow Patriarchate that the ecumenical dialogue would be fruitless until the Vatican resolved the so-called Uniate question in Ukraine. The situation became more complicated because the relations between Greco-Catholics and pro-Autocephalous Orthodox in Ukraine during the last 2 decades were quite friendly. In 2012, the Ukrainian Greco-Catholic Church officially recognized the validity of baptism in the Ukrainian Orthodox Church Kievan Patriarchate. Moscow Patriarchate doesn't recognize them even as Christians, as I said before. That recognition provoked a new wave of criticism from Moscow Patriarchate, and I'm convinced a bunch of appeals to the Vatican. As for the high level of relations, Vatican official representatives usually avoid any official meeting with the pro-Autocephalous leaders in Ukraine. Pope John Paul II did meet with the Patriarch Philaret during his visit to Ukraine, but only in Philaret's capacity as a member of the Ukrainian Council of Churches and Religious Organizations. It was a clever trick that made their meeting possible. It was mentioning that after the death of the saintly Pope, Patriarch Philaret served a panachida, a memorial service, a powerful gesture, since there was an opposition within the Ukrainian Orthodox Church Kievan Patriarchate to such a memorial service. Only a week ago, Ukrainian media spread the news that during the meeting of Minister of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine, Pavlo Klimkin, with Archbishop Gallagher, a representative of the Holy See's Secretariat of State, the former expressed the Vatican's respect for pro-Autocephalous sentiments within Ukrainian society. The reaction of Archbishop Claudio Gugerotti, the present nuncio to Ukraine, to this news report was harsh and immediate. It is quite understandable that the processes within the Orthodox world aren't the competency of the Vatican. But it is also clear that the Vatican finds itself in a very delicate situation, and it is highly likely that this situation will be far more complicated if Constantinople will grant autocephaly to Ukraine, since Moscow officially proclaimed that it would withdraw from all organizations and gatherings where representatives of Constantinople would be present, and they will certainly break all forms of relations with those who will enter into communication with the new Autocephalous Church in Ukraine. Such a situation might last for decades. I think that the intensification of the meetings of Metropolitan Ilarion Alfeyev with different representatives of the Catholic Church, which we saw in the last few weeks, testified that the Moscow Patriarchate wants to prevent the possible involvement of new Ukrainian Autocephalous Church in the ecumenical dialogue. And here we come to the most exciting point. Is the Vatican's Ostpolitik prepared for the re-emergence of the second ancient and venerable ecclesiastical center in Eastern Europe? As we could see during the last decades and even centuries, this politik was more or less prepared to deal with one center. And of course, that center still wants to be the only one and without any rivals. I don't have the answer yet, and I don't think that the Vatican, at the Vatican, they already have it either. But I think here rests the great opportunity for the whole ecumenical dialogue. First of all, it might be liberated from the numerous political entanglements of the Cold War era. The return of the oldest Eastern European ecclesiastical see in its Eastern Orthodox form to the stage of global Christianity could help to heal the Vatican's Ostpolitik. It could free the Orthodox Catholic dialogue from blackmail and could bring into the dialogue a new voice, breaking the monopoly of Moscow, which pretends to speak on behalf of all Eastern Slavs. I am well aware that the new church might not be well prepared for such a dialogue, but I think it can improve its capability with the openness and help from the Church of Constantinople and from Catholics. If the seminarians of Moscow Patriarchate can study in Rome or other Catholic universities around the world, why can't Ukrainian Orthodox have the same opportunities? And what about ecumenical relations between Catholics and Orthodox within Ukraine? There are some fears on the side of Greco-Catholics today, mostly because it is not clear on which principles this new Autocephalous Church will develop its relations with the state. Will it be a Russian model or more civilized one? It is hard to predict also what the mainstream approach to the Greco-Catholic Church on the part of the new church will be. Will it be again a Russian one or more unbiased? But again, as in the case of ecumenical dialogue on the global level, the emergence of an independent Ukrainian church, officially recognized by the ecumenical patriarch, might bolster dialogue between Ukrainian Christians of Eastern tradition. First of all, in today's highly complicated situation within Ukrainian Orthodoxy, it is too hard to establish genuine, official, and long-term dialogue between Greco-Catholics and Orthodox, starting with, for example, a common group for translation of different liturgical texts or some kind of historical commission which would be helpful in healing the memories of the past. If such inter-Ukrainian ecumenical dialogue would be fruitful, it could also make a great contribution on the global level. It could put aside a cliched argument of Moscow Patriarchate that one of the main obstacles in the Catholic Orthodox dialogue is the very existence of the Eastern Catholic churches. Of course, the pressure from the side of Moscow Patriarchate will be strong enough, and one can predict that for some time we might hear a lot of blackmail. We might see a lot of attempts to isolate the Ukrainian church from all contacts with other churches. And it is highly likely that we will also see Rome's position to be reserved and cautious. But I'm convinced that the anticipated autocephaly is a really chance for ecumenism. Thank you.